Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 2021 4A State Basketball Tournament Preview. I'm Elan Olliff, joined by my good friend Cullen Holt. And Cullen, we're 2 days into this week of basketball. We had the 3A tournament end, and now it's time for the big schools, 4A. And you know what? What's kind of going through my head right now, do you remember before the football season started, they had that promo, that It's All Coming Back to Me one?
Yes, absolutely.
That is exactly what's coming back. As most people remember, it was the first day of the 4A, 3A tournament was when kind of the world changed forever. I mean, there's no arguing that. But now we get it back. We're going to see these great basketball teams do battle. Cullen, let's go ahead and just break down the brackets. Let's start ladies first, since we are gentlemen here at mylocalradio.com. Number 2, Green River will take on number 3, Central. We'll hear later on from Wild Preps David Settle. I can't wait to get his look at this game. And man, Green River has been a monster in the West for the last 2 years. They're led by, of course, Madeline Heiser. And I think this is going to be probably one of the better games in that first round. Central, they come in, they're just solid from top to bottom. Glenn Kirkbride always has something up his sleeve against these guys, especially at a state championship game.
Absolutely. And the thing about 4A basketball is they've been spending all season just beating up on each other. And they get better and better with each game because the competition is so tough. And that's what makes it so interesting going into the playoffs, is you've got some really battle-tested squads.
Absolutely. The 9 o'clock game at Casper College, that's Green River Central. At 9 o'clock at the Ford Wyoming Center, formerly known as the Casper Events Center. That's going to take some getting used to, I'm not going to lie. Number 1 out of the East taking on number 4 out of the West. East versus Star Valley. Now, the Thunderbirds last year had this player, of course, you've probably heard of him if you heard of her if you've paid attention to high school basketball, Kai Buell. No Kai Buell this season, but still a deadly Thunderbirds team nonetheless taking on Star Valley. Duke Dance from SBI Media is going to join us later on to talk about this a little bit. One thing that stands out to me, Star Valley's defense is on point. East offense, though, and just the way that they work as a team, that's going to be a very, very interesting matchup.
Absolutely, and that's always fascinating to me when you've got a good offensive team versus a good defensive team. It's a question of two things. Who can do what they don't do super well better than the other, or who can do what they do best better than the other team? And it's really interesting which one ends up kind of being the key.
Moving on to the 10:30 games on Friday morning, we'll have Casper College, number 2, Thunder Basin taking on number 3, Cody. Now, not a lot of people have seen Cody from what I've been able to tell. I've seen them in person, and a really, really young team, but the basketball IQ is off the charts. Thunder Basin, of course, with there being no state tournament last year, are the reigning state champions. And this is the first senior class for Thunder Basin that started with this high school, as that school is very, very young. Thunder Basin ranked number 1 most of the season. East was able to kind of get them in that Eastern Regional Final. But Thunder Basin and Cody, this is going to be a fun one. It's going to be experience versus inexperience, but high basketball IQ and a lot of potential.
Yeah, and here's the thing about that is Thunder Basin might have revenge on their mind. And when it comes to the state tournament, you cannot look past any game. You can't be looking at the other side of the bracket and be like, well, if we win this and we play this time, this. You can't do that. You got to take it one step at a time. That's so important.
At 10:30 at the Ford Wyoming Center, we've got number 1 out of the West, Natrona County, taking on Sheridan, number 4 out of the East. Sheridan pulls off the upset to get into the state tournament. Huge win for them over Campbell County. Natrona County, though, this team, I saw them in person as well. They are the real deal and could very easily be playing on Saturday night at 3:30 p.m. for that state title.
No, absolutely. And that's the thing. There's so many good teams, and that's just one of them.
Let's go ahead and move on to the boys' side of the bracket. It gets started at 12 o'clock p.m. at Casper College. Number 2 out of the East, Thunder Basin taking on number 3, Green River. Green River, a team with me being the voice of the Evanston Red Devils, fairly familiar with. Dylan Taylor, Jacob Foose, those two are gamers. But Thunder Basin, especially just how they play and how fast they play, that is going to be fun to see if Green River can figure out a way to slow them down.
Yeah, can Green River control the pace is the question. And here's the interesting thing about Green River, because you go back to the Evanston-Green River matchups, because that's kind of your wheelhouse right there. Evanston got the best of Green River during the regular season. Green River is on the upward trend now, though, having reversed that.
Absolutely. At 12 o'clock at the Ford Wyoming Center, it'll be Star Valley versus Easton. The big question here, Graydon Buell, probably one of the front runners for Player of the Year. His health is a little bit in question. We'll talk with David Settle from Wild Preps more about that later. But if he's not healthy, does that open the door for Star Valley?
Got a Michael Jordan flu game. That's what we need, right?
Yeah.
Well, that'd be fun to see in the first round.
Absolutely. At 1:30 at the Casper College, we've got number 2 out of the West, Riverton, taking on Sheridan. Now, Sheridan was number 1 for most of the year, stubbed their toe at the regional tournament, but you can never count out Sam Leckalot, reigning Gatorade Player of the Year. Riverton, though, I would say, after seeing them in person a few times, they've got a complete team, but it's going to be a tall task against Sheridan.
And that's the thing. There's a mix-up between the rankings, the top 5 rankings, and the seeds, which goes to show you that postseason basketball is a whole different beast than the regular season.
At 1:30 at the Ford Wyoming Center, it'll be Central taking on Rock Springs. Central number 1 out of the East after failing to get out of the regional tournament last year, after being number 1 in the Wild Preps coaches and media poll, literally from week 1 all the way to the end of the regular season. They get out of the regional tournament this time, and you kind of wonder if this is kind of the Tom Brady back in 2017 kind of revenge tour type deal. We're going to go out there, beat them all, and prove we are the best in the state.
Giant chip on their shoulder. Giant.
Yeah, that's an understatement. Rock Springs will have a tall order against them. Then knocking off Cody in the quadrant game, and then getting the number 4 seed in the West. Big accomplishment for them. Central, that's a whole nother animal.
Absolutely.
Now we are joined by Riverton Wolverines broadcaster Erick Pauley. Erick, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. Riverton Wolverines, they're going to be number 2 on the west side of the boys bracket. What is it about this team that just makes them so solid? I've seen them in person twice, and they're just so solid. They don't make a lot of mistakes.
They're a team that, they don't have a whole lot of, despite what the stat line says, they don't have a whole lot of star power. And so what you've ended up with is a group of about 8 kids, the 5 starters and then the first few off of the bench, that are just extremely unselfish basketball players. And, you see the big stat lines from Jared Lucas, but that's really come to fruition because of the teamwork of all the guards and the other post and Lucas Engel. They play good fundamental basketball and good unselfish basketball. So their ability to game plan against opponents isn't kind of muddied up by that one star player trying to, get their stat line, if you will. And I think that's their strongest attribute.
Hey, Erick, this is Cullen here. I just wanted to take a moment real quick and step aside from kind of the specifics and ask you more about, how exciting is this tournament to you as far as unpredictability goes? Because it feels like in following 4A basketball, it feels like there are a lot of teams that can make a splash at any given time. Is that kind of an accurate assessment?
Yeah. The early part of the season is kind of dictating how I feel right now about headed to the state tournament. Mm-hmm. If you would have asked me during the first 2 weeks of the preseason, I would have told you I'm not sure Riverton's going to make it to state because we saw all of those really, really tough teams in the east side of the state in the early season tourneys. And then, as the season progressed, it was pretty clear that the West was kind of wide open. Between Riverton, Star Valley, Green River, those teams were all very, very close. And so it became evident that we were going to have a chance to play in Casper. Now, looking at the eastern side of the state, I was very surprised to see that Sheridan got knocked off. And, I mean, that's kind of unfortunate for Riverton in terms of the way the seeding worked out. I would say on the western side of the state, went between Green River and Riverton, you've got a couple of teams there that on any given day you might see them beat one another. But on the eastern side of the state, between Central, Sheridan, East, all of those teams, Thunder Basin, those aren't what I like to call 10 out of 10 games. If they play 10 times, the better team wins 10 times. I don't think that's the case. They might split it down the middle. And so I think the uncertainty and the excitement level comes from the eastern side of the state to see who's going to end up on their side of the bracket.
I gotta be surprised. I'm surprised to see Rock Springs here. I mean, they lose their best player, Alan Hernandez, and now here they are getting ready to take on Central.
So the Rock Springs kid, Alan, he actually played in the regional tournament. So I thought he broke his arm, is what I'd been told, but evidently that was not the case. He actually dislocated his elbow pretty bad against Riverton a couple of weeks ago. And so he came back. He had a chance to play. And he's playing in a brace and is fighting through it. He's not 100%, but he's a presence on the court for them still. So it was kind of surprising to see Rock Springs get there, although, between them and Cody, I thought they were very similar in terms of teams. And that was like a 50-50 shot there between those two of who was going to beat who. First round matchups, it's, a lot of these West teams are looking at a buzzsaw on the other side of the state. And, that could be said from everybody from the 1 seed Star Valley to play East, which, East is a 4 seed, but it's Cheyenne East. They're going to be a very, very, very good team. And they've, got some history there with Star Valley as well. And then, the draw for Rock Springs with Central is just tough because, anytime you got a 7-foot kid the interesting thing about Central, right, is they've got a 6'8" kid, and he's the second tallest kid on the team.
Yeah, Lawson Lovering, the 7-footer who's already committed to University of Colorado. He's an absolute monster.
Right. So it's the power lies in the East, and that kind of takes some of the pressure off of these West teams, though. They've got nothing to lose here. They get to go put it out on the court, and if you were to ask broadcasters across the state or coaches across the state, I'd say it's almost probably a clean sweep where they're expecting the East to win in the opening round, give or take a few outliers here or there. So for the West, it's a chance to get to kind of prove themselves and leave it all on the court.
Let's go ahead and transition to the girls' side. This is a little bit different of a situation. I think you've got two of the top 3 teams in the state coming out of the Northwest. Of course, we're talking about Natrona and Cody. Just really quick, talk about those two teams and how they've been able to kind of be that exception of the West starting to compete for a state title with the East.
Sure. The Natrona County's girls team is very similar to the team they had. I want to say it was 2017 or 2018, somewhere around there. They were just extremely dominant. They were so tall, so athletic, and so physical. And that's what makes Natrona so good is that they're the combination. There's a difference between an athlete and a basketball player. You could be a very good basketball player and not be a stupendous athlete. But the case with Natrona is they're both. They're fantastic athletes and they're fantastic basketball players. And, they don't miss layups. Rebounding wise, they're going to push you off the court. And then their guards are some of the best ball handlers that you'll see in the state. And with any of those bigger 4A schools, more often than not, their biggest strength is the fact that they don't lose a lot when they go to their bench. And that's Natrona County. I saw the brunt of this with Riverton with a 70-point ball game at one point in time during this year. And then, the other teams in the West, Cody, that's another team. They've got some shooters on the outside, and if they're hot, they're gonna make you pay. They could shoot you out of the zone for sure. And then Green River, they're a pretty solid team. They've got the Strauss girl. She's kind of where it starts with for them, and so if she struggles, then Green River's going to struggle. I would not be surprised to see the Phillies from Natrona playing for a title this year.
That's Erick Pauley, broadcaster for the Riverton Wolverines. Erick, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people catch your game? I believe you've got Riverton versus Sheridan at 1:30 at Casper College. Where can they catch that?
Yep, you can catch the stream online at yotoday.com, and we'll be running a video scoreboard on our Facebook page, YO Today.
Awesome. Erick, thank you so much for the time. Safe travels to Casper. We'll see you there. Man, I said it earlier, that Riverton team is a full team. The stat sheet, you have certain players that jump off, but it's a full team, and it's going to take a full effort for them to have a chance against Sheridan.
Yeah, that's a tough draw. Lots of tough matchups in this first round. That's a tough draw.
We'll go ahead and get started. Joining us now, we have Duke Dance of SVI, of course, the voice of the Star Valley Braves. And Duke, another great basketball season for Star Valley. We're going to talk about the 4A Southwest here in a second. But when you look back on how this season kind of started, how exciting is it that we get to go to a state tournament this year?
Oh, man. Yeah, fantastic. It's crazy that it was a year ago that everything shut down, guys. But, if you go back even into the fall, there wasn't a lot of optimism about the season going through football and volleyball and everything. And of course it did with just a few cancellations. But then you go into winter and numbers were so much higher at that point, especially in December with the COVID numbers and everything being indoors. And, I was hopeful at that point that we would have a full season, but I expected there to be a lot more cancellations and postponements. And there were a few schools that did, but, speaking for Star Valley High School, it was a normal schedule. Everything went on, everything was played, and fingers crossed we can make it happen this weekend.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard for me not to think about the state tournament and not think about that was the day really it all started. Everything kind of started the day that they canceled that state tournament. It was day one, and that was the day where it was declared a pandemic. That was the day where MLB shut down. That was the day where NBA shut down. It really is hard for me not to think about the state tournament and think about where we were a year ago and be really, really, really excited for where we're headed.
I'll never forget it because my announcer, my color announcer, Dal Erickson, and I were at the event center, and we were ready to call the next game at the event center. It was the Pinedale Lady Wranglers, and they hadn't been to the state tournament in years, and finally got there. And we were setting up on the floor of the event center for that broadcast, and one of the officials came over and said, "Hey, guys, don't get too excited. They're going to kick you out of here."
Mm-hmm.
Now, what? What is he talking about?
Yep.
And then of course, they make the announcement, and at first it was they're going to play, but with media only. And then as they were announcing, they were just about ready to announce the starters for the next game. And here's Pinedale. They hadn't been there in years, and they're on the bench. They're about ready to get announced for the state tournament. And that's when they say, "You know what? We're canning the whole thing. It's all canceled." It was just like, are you kidding me?
Yep.
So, yeah, it was crazy.
Looking ahead to the bracket now, if we can kind of take a sneak peek, let's start on the girls' side. What do you think is the most intriguing matchup to you in the girls' bracket?
Well, that Natrona-Sheridan game, to me, is certainly intriguing because Natrona, of course, winning the game in the West, winning the 1 seed in the West. Sheridan's a solid team, and Natrona, they played so close with Cody, and they barely, well, I shouldn't say barely, but in the region championship game, they do get by Green River, and it's close. I don't know why. That's just a really intriguing matchup to me to see if Natrona is really going to be a competitor for that final game, and I think it has to start with Sheridan. So as far as those first round matchups, I think that one may be one of the more intriguing ones.
One game that I've got my eye on as well in that first round on the girls' side of the bracket, that East Star Valley game. I mean, East is good, but I think it really shocked a lot of people that they beat Thunder Basin and got that number 1 seed. And then, of course, Star Valley, I've seen them in person a few times, and they just seem to do whatever it takes to get the win. Can you kind of give us a quick preview of that East Star Valley matchup?
Yeah, Star Valley played East in Rock Springs actually at the beginning of the season in some pre-conference games, and it was fairly close. East was able to win that, but Star Valley has developed so much since then, and I agree. I was kind of expecting it to be Star Valley Thunder Basin, but that's why you play those games, right? So it's going to be Star Valley East. But I'll tell you one thing about the Lady Braves is they are scrappy on defense, and I think defensively, Star Valley matches up with anyone in the state. They really, really do, and I'm going to throw Thunder Basin in that mix too. I think their defense is just as good as any other defense in the state, and that's what they've hung their hats on all year long, and we've seen that. They're scrappy, they hustle, they run to the ball, and then offensively in the last month or so, we've really seen the Lady Braves come alive with ball movement, and they have been able to score better. It's not anything that's blowing anyone's socks off, but I tell you what, if Star Valley can get their offense going, their defense is going to keep them in that game. And if they can get some shots and some ball movement offensively and take care of the ball and not turn it over and good passes, they'll be in it. It certainly would be an upset to beat East without question, but I don't think it's going to be a blowout. They should be in that one.
The other one that I got my eye on, and it just dawned on me, Green River's number 2. They're going to be taking on Central. That should be another fascinating game.
Well, look, there's no gimmies in 4A, right?
No.
There isn't, and that one, if you're gonna pick Green River Central, I don't even know, guys. I mean, that one for me is a coin flip. Just flip the coin. I don't even know how to call that one heading into it. That one should be a great one.
Let's go ahead and talk about the boys bracket. Of course, Green River will be taking on Thunder Basin. That one, I think if you ask 10 broadcasters, 10 out of 10 would say, I would probably give that one to Thunder Basin, and because of just how well that offense operates. I know there is some concerns about how well a 3-point shooting offense traditionally does at state because of just how some things change when you're in that, I guess it's now called the Ford Wyoming Center. But what does that Green River Thunder Basin matchup look like to you?
Well, I think you hit a lot of the main points on the head. Green River obviously earned the right to be at the state tournament. But it's speaking as a guy from the West, the strength in 4A is in the East, right? And Thunder Basin, as you mentioned, a 3-point shooting team. I look at Green River, and I don't think they have the horses to keep up with Thunder Basin. Green River is a team that has to win scrappy, and they have to win in the paint and aggression and close, tight games with maybe a turnover or two at the end. And I just don't see them keeping up with Thunder Basin. Maybe they do for the first period or two, but if Thunder gets on a roll, even for a quarter, they could open that one up.
And then the game that I'm sure you've been studying for a while, and you got some things to say about that. Star Valley is going to be taking on Grayton Buell and the East Thunderbirds. Grayton probably a main contender for Player of the Year, but this East team does have some weaknesses. And do you think Star Valley can exploit that?
I do. Grayton Buell didn't play last week in the region tournament, and in the 4A East tournament. So it goes to show how much of an important player he is to that team. Not only is he likely the contender for the MVP of the year in Wyoming, but his importance to the 2 East in general. You see what happens when they don't have him on the court. When I look at the matchup, Star Valley they've been a hard team to really figure out, to be honest, because they will come out and they will slash to the basket. In some games, you just cannot take away the dribble drive from Star Valley. You have Coulter Merritt, and you have Brant Nelson, and you have Cortland Hilton, and those guys and others will just slash you all game long. And then you have other games like we saw the quad and region play last week where they'll be content to shoot and sit outside and shoot 3 balls. And I don't think they're as good when they do that, but I think they're a dynamic enough team that they can compete with East. And when you're the one team playing the 1 seed out of the West and playing the 4 seed out of the East, you're expected to be able to compete. So I think for me, the question in that game is going to come down to the half-court play of Star Valley, and can they do enough to force East into maybe a couple mistakes in the half-court game? And that's where Star Valley defensively has really played well, is when they can force turnovers and cause problems in the half-court, then that's where they look good. And if they can do that against East, then I'm going to say they have a shot.
That's Duke Dance. He is the voice of the Star Valley Braves. Duke, let everybody know where they can catch the Star Valley games at the state tournament.
Yeah, so normally, of course, we have the video broadcast like you guys do, but our good friends over at the NFHS will have the video, so we'll be doing audio only. You can find the links to listen at sbinews.com, and we'll have Dal and myself there. We will have some things on the screen, such as stacks and the scoreboard and that kind of thing, but just no video. So it's all at sbinews.com.
Duke, thank you so much. We'll see you in Casper. You travel safely, man.
Hey, you too. Appreciate it. See ya.
Man, I love talking to that guy. He's so much fun. And you know what else is really fun? Staying at the Come On In Casper. They are sponsoring this show. Big thank you to them. Here's the message from our friends at the Come On In Casper.
Folks have many reasons to visit Casper, Wyoming every year, whether it's work, high school sports and activities, a romantic getaway, or business meetings. The best place to stay when you're in Casper is the Come On In Hotel and Suites. A beautiful log hotel offers 5 hot tubs, a pool, fitness center, and a fabulous indoor atrium. You can also reserve meeting rooms for your next event, and each stay includes an extended continental breakfast. Reserve your rooms today at the Come On In Hotel and Suites in Casper, Wyoming. Call 307-472-6300.
Welcome back to the 2021 4A West State Preview Show on mylocalradio.com. I'm Elan Olliff, joined by my friend Cullen Holt. And we've had a great show. Earlier, we heard from Erick Pauley from Riverton, as well as Thunder Basin's broadcaster, Chris Brentle. And we got a heck of a great show for you on the second half. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, in this back half of the show, we're going to hear from some guys who really know their hoops, especially when David Settle stops by. We're just waiting for him to call in. And that's going to give you a really good idea of what's going to go on here.
And joining us now, we have voice of the Thunder Basin Bolts, the Campbell County Camels, basically everything Gillette, and good friend of mine, Chris Brentle. Chris, thank you so much for calling in. How you doing today?
Man, I am doing fantastic. About to go get some soft carne asada tacos, so I'm doing good.
That is definitely not a bad thing to be doing. Chris, like me, you were in Casper the day they canceled the tournament. Having those memories from a year ago, how much more does this event mean to you now that we knock on wood, we're going to get it back?
Well, as somebody that loves to call games, I would call a game every day of the week if I could. And so that was devastating, as I know it was for you, too, because you love what you do as well. It was a devastating moment. I was driving down with my wife, and we got the call. It was canceled, and went to the press conference. It was a whole ordeal, and I'm really glad that we live in a state where we have the opportunity to finish out the season. It's all started with Legion Baseball. We were able to get most of that season in, finished it out, and went on to football, now basketball. So this whole thing means a lot to me because I know what it's like to lose something. I mean, especially with this, Gillette College, I call games for them, and they were disbanded, and their sports were cut, partly due to COVID, and so that hurt too. So there's a lot of things, a lot of reasons why this is so important to me, and I'm really going to enjoy every little detail, every little call, every little second of the state tournament.
Chris, I know for broadcasters it's so special to have this back, but just real quick, from your perspective, all season, watching these teams respond to what's been a very unique year and a very unique season, what has that been like for you? Because they, too, have kind of gained a new appreciation for being able to play every game.
Yeah, it just permeates throughout the coaching staff and permeates throughout the players. You can feel their appreciation. I think I've seen a lot of teams up here, especially they play with a little more tenacity, I think, because of it, a little more sense of urgency, because they know it could all end any minute. I mean, if there's a spread throughout your team, they're not going to let you play in this crazy world that we live in. We have been so just overhyped about this whole thing, and it's just caused a lot of wreckage. And even still today, if a player comes up with it, you don't even know if they're going to be able to play in the state tournament or something like that. We've overreacted to a point where that's the way it is. We've overreacted to a point to where we don't have tip-offs anymore. For some reason, we're inbounding the basketball, and that is partly why I think there's a sense of urgency from these players. And then coaches, I know a lot of coaches that tell their players the same thing. Hey, you don't know if you're going to get another game. You don't know if you're going to get another tournament. So go all out. So I think it's a positive effect in the sense that they know that there's a sense of urgency. They know they could lose it all any minute, and that's kind of a lesson taught from last year. But it's also a lot of negatives with it, too.
Let's go ahead and talk about the tournament we do have. Let's go ladies first, and Thunder Basin being upset by East in the Eastern Regional Championship game. They're going to take on a tough Cody team. What do you know about that matchup?
I know that Thunder Basin is, right, to me, even despite the loss, they're head and shoulders above everybody in the state. And I I think that's a wake-up call loss, personally. However, if you were to pinpoint, you want to nitpick Thunder Basin, a lot of their prior teams had a lot of star power to them, and they had, a few players averaging in double figures. Well, sometimes, I think one year they had 4 players averaging in double figures. This year they have Gabby Droop, who's a star. I mean, she's a superstar. What a great year she's had. But, offensively, if you're talking half-court offense where you have to win basketball games when it comes to the state tournament, you've got to score in the half-court. You've got to stop teams in the half-court. It's not going to be this up-and-down game the whole game. That's just not how it works typically. So that would be my concern for Thunder Basin. Can they score consistently in the half-court? East kind of exploited that. I believe in the game. If I'm not mistaken, the Lady Bolts had a couple of scoring droughts. So they went almost 4 minutes twice without scoring. And if they do that at the state tournament, that's going to be trouble. Now, they do have a lot of potential as well. They have Jolie Speltz, who's a sophomore averaging close to 11 points per game. She's going to be dominant, like Player of the Year candidate dominant next year and the year after that. But again, she's young. So it's about who's going to step up for Thunder Basin late in this season. But that's my only concern for this team, star power-wise. Cody's a young team. They're an up-and-coming team. I think they just haven't really seen exactly a team like Thunder Basin. I think that's a step up. And also, I don't think if you're Cody, you want to catch the Lady Bolts after a loss. Natrona, now that could be interesting, especially the same day. The Thunder Basin girls don't get, the ample rest, and so I think the other thing Natrona will have going for them too, if that happens in the second round, is the pressure's going to be on Thunder Basin.
Yeah, you talk about that Natrona County game. Of course, the other team from the Northeast will be Sheridan playing Natrona County. Sheridan upsetting Campbell County. You've seen the Sheridan team. What do they have to offer in this matchup?
First off, I was absolutely shocked that Sheridan. That's one of the most shocking upsets I can remember in a while. I understand Campbell County wasn't a one-loss team, two-loss team, but they had won 7 of 10. They played pretty well against Thunder Basin twice in that span and kind of hung around in those games. I did not see that coming. I really didn't see that coming. Sheridan gets in the tournament. I don't necessarily think they're a legitimate threat to the tournament. If I'm being honest, I think they snuck one in and got Campbell County, and well-deserved. They're going to the state tournament. They got a nice upset win. But I think they're overmatched once they get in here, quite frankly.
Let's go ahead and talk about the boys. It looks pretty good for Thunder Basin. You're going to get Green River in round 1, and then you're probably going to get the winner of Star Valley and East. That path, I don't mean to be down on those other 3 teams. That path looks pretty favorable for the Bolts.
With Thunder Basin, the concern is this. You're playing 2 games in one day. The next day's a championship. They rely on the 3-ball, and that's the concern. Otherwise, you're right. It's a nice road. You probably against Cheyenne Central, if they played, let's say, in the title game, a 50-50 thing there, maybe you get the edge to Central. But for Thunder Basin, how are they going to win is going to be key. It's just going to be key. If they win these first 2 games, how they do it is going to be interesting, because if they have to hoist up a bunch of threes, they're not going to have legs for the championship game. And that being said, if they have to hoist up a bunch of threes against Green River, they might not have legs that night. So they need to get to the basket. And Rory Williams knows it, and he tells me this all the time. Like, some of those guys that hit the threes, he goes, we got to get these guys to the rim. And Deacon Williams understands that he gets to the rim. Even Mikkel Holte, who's a great three-point shooter, getting to the rim. So if this team can get a bunch of twos, get to the rim, win the first 2 games, I like their chances in the title game, no matter who they're going against. I think one little interesting tidbit, let's get a little bit in the X's and O's here. When they played Sheridan kept a couple of smaller guards up to make it to where Deegan basically, they didn't double team him necessarily, but he couldn't go right, he couldn't go left necessarily. So they made him give up the basketball, or he was going to shoot it. And he'd rather drive at the rim and score. And then I noticed Cheyenne Central did the exact same thing. So keep an eye on that. That is something Thunder Basin's have to figure out, because they want Deegan to give up the basketball at the top of the key. They don't want him just to slither in the lane, because he can drive past anybody in the league. Anybody in the state he can get drive past. So they definitely want him to settle for threes. They want him to give the ball up, not while he's driving, but out there. And if one of these teams here in the first couple rounds can do that, they have a chance. But, again, it was Deegan Williams, and he figured things out in that Central game and sometimes in that Sheridan game as well. You can try to contain him, but it's really hard to stop him completely.
Let's go ahead and talk about Sheridan a little bit. I'm glad you bring him up. That's got to be one of the most deadly three scenes I've ever seen. Sheridan is a number 3, and they'll play Riverton in the first round. If Sheridan wins that on paper, I guess you could call it an upset. But, I mean, this is a team that was ranked number 1 in the Wild Preps Coaches and Media Poll almost all season. Deadly sneaker there.
Well, I'm not saying Sheridan can't lose this first-round game, but what I'm saying is that would be a big upset, in my opinion. If Sheridan loses, that's the upset. That's a good basketball team. Don't let their little seeds fool you, as you were just saying. It's not fooling you, but I mean, you have Lecolot, who is just, man, he's outstanding. He has willed that team to victory so many times his career. And then you have a bunch of solid shooters, a team that doesn't turn it over, a team that passes the ball well. They don't beat themselves. So a team that doesn't beat themselves, they know the role, and they have a star. And I've never seen – do they say the corner three is the toughest shot in basketball? Don't tell Sheridan that. They hit that corner three like it's nothing, all of them. So, I mean, that's just a solid basketball team. Again, Sheridan, their question marks, the same thing. You got Lecolot, but who's going to score behind them? They need two – if they weren't win state, they need 3 guys to step up. I mean, they're going to have 3 double-figure scores if they're going to win state. That's just the reality of the situation. Unless Lecolot scores 30 to 35, then they can get away with 2 scores in the game. But they really need those other guys to step up scoring the basketball.
Well, that's Chris Brentle, broadcaster for everything. If it's in Gillette, Chris Brentle's all over it. Chris, let people know where they can catch the Thunder Basin games at state this week.
Hey, man, you know what? Friday, I'm going to be busy, okay? So 10:30, noon. So the girls play at 10:30, boys play at noon, quarterfinal games. Coverage will be right at about 10:20. And those games can be heard on News Radio 106.7 FM and online at basinsradio.com on the Kimmel stream. Also, if both of those teams win or one of those teams win, the girls would play later at 6 in the semis. The boys will play at 7:30. All those games can be heard on News Radio 106.7 FM and online at basinsradio.com on the KIML stream. And, of course, the same for the championship games at 3:30 and 5 on Saturday. Also, can I plug something else real quick?
Absolutely.
Hey, I'm going to do a shameless plug. I never miss the opportunity to do a shameless plug. I just started a podcast. You can go to basinsradio.com and listen to said podcast. I talk about everything, bro. It's dating, it's fashion, it's politics, it's sports. It is everything that you could think of. Now, the first podcast, I rant about Tom Brady a lot. I'm a Chiefs fan, and I'm still bitter. So I'll just throw that out there. Anyway, so, yeah, go check that out if you would like. And, again, that's basinsradio.com. Go to listen to our streams on KIML, and somewhere in there you can find it. It's kind of difficult to find, but, you might find it.
I'll have to check that out,
Chris. They might hate it, too. I mean, they might listen to it and think, oh, this sucks, or they might love it. Who knows?
I'll have to check that out. I definitely think I could benefit from some fashion advices. You are the sharpest dressed broadcaster in the state, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on and
Thanks, man.
doing
I
the
appreciate
show.
That. Sounds good, dude. I really do appreciate it. Oh, I'll give you, since you mentioned fashion, I'll give you a little tip. You know when it never goes out of style? Polo shirts, button-up shirts. Never goes out of style.
That's so funny you mentioned that. Cullen's wearing a polo shirt. I'm wearing a button-up shirt. So nice job.
Yes. Good job, guys.
All right, Chris, we'll see you later.
All right, bye.
Bye. Cullen, the more and more I think about it, that Star Valley East matchup is intriguing, especially if the big question, Graydon Buell, is he healthy? Is he 100%? Is he going to be ready to go? That's really, really interesting to me.
And that's exactly why we have guys like Duke Dance stop by, is because they've got the inside look. You know, we don't know what's going on, and he comes by and tells us, hey, here's what's going on with this team. Here's how they can maybe find a path to getting a victory here, and that's insight you can't find anywhere else.
Joining us now, we have the professor, the man who runs YO Preps, and, of course, the voice of the Laramie Plainsmen and Plainswomen, David Settle. David, thank you so much for coming on to this show. Super excited to talk basketball with you.
Absolutely. Can't wait. Elan, what do you got for me?
All right, so let's go ahead and first talk about this girls bracket. You are the man who knows really the whole state, but you work in the 4A Southeast, and going there for the 4A Southeast, you're going to have, of course, Cheyenne East and Cheyenne Central. Nobody's surprised that those are the two teams that are going. East, though, beating Thunder Basin. A lot of people had Thunder Basin as kind of like that far and away favorite. How did East pull that off?
I think they put together the perfect game on the perfect day. And perfect is probably stretching it, because I know that was one of those games where East and Thunder Basin play really similar types of basketball, and they're going to press you all over the floor. They're trying to create turnovers. And if you get on a little hot streak, which East did, it was a game of runs where East got out to a big lead and then Thunder Basin closed it down. East got out to a bigger lead, Thunder Basin closed it down. And I think it got to 39-38, and Thunder Basin had pulled within one, and then all of a sudden it was a 53-38 game. And I believe the biggest lead ended up being 15 points for East in that game. And then back came Thunder Basin. They got as close as 2 in the fourth quarter, but could never tie it or get over the hump. And again, it's just such a copycat style of basketball. I mean, they play so similar. It's like looking in a mirror, and it's, can you convert and can you get some big baskets at the right time? And that's exactly how Cheyenne East knocked off Thunder Basin. I look at those two, East and Thunder Basin, and Natrona, to me, Elan, as the clear-cut top 3 in girls basketball in 4A for Wyoming this year.
I would have to agree with you. I've seen Natrona County in person fairly recently, and just they were impressive. There's no other way to put it. Let's go ahead and talk about that first matchup, Star Valley taking on East. We had Duke Dance on from SVI Media earlier. He said that Star Valley's defense is good enough to be in the game, but the real concern is their offense. East, as you mentioned, has an explosive offense. How does Star Valley's defense have a chance at slowing that down?
Well, they really have to keep East out of transition. It's kind of, you're going to hear me say this with the boys for Cheyenne East, but both Cheyenne East teams really like to play in transition. They're going to full court press you some of the time. This East girls team doesn't full court press you as much as they have in the past, but when they can transition, their guard play and their ball movement, I would say, is almost second to none for a girls this season. And you don't have one star. If you think back to Cheyenne East girls last year, a lot of it was about Kai Buell. And Kai Buell was a fantastic girls basketball player for 4 years. Started at Rock Springs and finished her career at Cheyenne East. So don't get me wrong about that. But you really can't key on one player for Cheyenne East. Now, Bowden Liljedahl, little sophomore guard, kind of has stepped in as the go-to player. She can really shoot the ball. She's got a pure stroke, but she can create for her teammates. And then you got a number of different players that can step up, whether it's the Jacobson twins, Brady Slaps, who's a freshman off the bench, Diana Alvarado's a senior that's averaging 9 points a game. They've got a couple of different players inside between Ashley Marshall, Kiera Walsh, and Darcy Jardine that they can get them some offensive rebounds and second and third opportunities, or they're talented enough where they can score a little bit that just keeps your defense on it. Star Valley's really going to have to keep Cheyenne East out of transition. You can't turn it over. You can't get a long shot and a rebound because they're going to go, and their ball movement in transition between the guard and wings is unbelievable. They do run the floor really well, and so Star Valley really has to play in the half court, and they've got to lock it down defensively. That's the only way I think they can compete and contend with Cheyenne East. I just think the Cheyenne East girls are that good.
Looking at the first game that'll take place at Casper College, it's going to feature Central taking on Green River. Now, that matchup, it's pretty intriguing to me. I've seen Green River a few times, and of course, Green River has been ranked in the Wild Preps top 5 pretty consistently throughout the season. Green River and Central, what stands out to you about that matchup?
Well, it's interesting because I think I saw Green River, and I like what Rick Carroll's squad has done throughout the season. Yeah, they've had a couple of hiccups here and there, but I think they're a well-coached group. Central is interesting because Coach Kirkbride always seems to have a game plan. And what was interesting was this is a rematch of the only 4A girls game that was played at state last year. The tournament was canceled right after this game had finished, and I had Green River beating Central last year, and Central doesn't bring back near as much from last year's state tournament team as Green River does. But Central, I don't know what it is. Coach Kirkbride, I call him a gamer as a coach. He finds little nuances and parts of the game plan that his team will exploit against their opponent, and they step up with just unbelievable games at the right time of year. And I think about regionals last year. They did the same thing and got themselves to the regional championship last year. Well, this time they needed an absolute huge win over Cheyenne South, who had beat them in their most recent regular season matchup, and they just barely got past them. And then, they beat a Sheridan team for third place Saturday at the regional that I think Sheridan was kind of on the upswing. And Central took care of them pretty handily, actually a little more handily than I thought they would. But this is a dangerous matchup for both teams because it comes down to whose offense is on. Both these teams don't mind getting into you defensively. If Strauss can knock down some threes and they can find some other offense on that squad, they're okay. For Central, it's about Kelsey Bassert and Bailey Delbridge. Delbridge is the leading scorer. Bassert's number 2. Bassert got injured about 3 weeks ago in the regular season, missed a few games, and then came back and played at last week's regional quadrant and then the whole regional final action on Saturday. So that gives them a little more balance, a 1-2 punch. But you get past those two, if you can slow them down, you're not going to stop them. But if you can slow them down enough, if you're Green River, then you got a good chance to win. Again, to me, it comes down to defense. Central does not mind getting down and dirty and playing it up in you defensively. Green River is going to have to make some shots, and they're going to have to play some good defense. I give Green River a slight edge in this matchup against Central in the rematch from a year ago, even though Central beat them, I think it was like 53-39 or something like that.
David, before we leave the girls' bracket, what do you think is the headlining story there?
I think it's a 3-horse race, as I said earlier, between Cheyenne East, Thunder Basin, and Natrona County. Thunder Basin and Natrona, I think, are going to battle in the semifinals. Now, can Cody compete with Thunder Basin? I haven't seen the Cody Phillies, but I get a sense that they're going to not back down from Thunder Basin. For Cody, it's got to be one of those where they can't be awestruck by the Gillette pressure and just everything that they've done. And I think maybe they did play early in the season, but it's one of those where Thunder Basin, they have so much depth. It's a different coach this year. They've improved so much from the beginning of the year, and I know they just got beat, but I think because they come off that loss, they'll be hungry and ready to go. Natrona County is a very similar team to Thunder Basin. I think it's going to be a great game. I think it's whoever wins that game will play Cheyenne East, and I think it's going to be a terrific 4A championship because I really think any one of the top 3 can win the title this season.
David, real quick, playing 2 games, if you win your quarterfinal, you play 2 games in one day. That's got to favor the teams that are a little bit deeper. Do you think it hurts the teams that like to play fast? I mean, how does that play into all of this?
I don't think it hurts them too much because I think if you can play fast and get a big lead, you might see teams rest their starters and their primary players a little bit more. You might see a little bit more rotation going to the bench earlier because coaches do realize that we might have a second game. Now, does that mean that you mess around with the rotation? Probably not. But I think that second game will factor into some coaches' minds, especially if they have a significant lead in the second half. It is a difficult ordeal. It's not anything that the fans like. Coaches and players probably don't care for it either. But you've already played twice in one day at the regional, so you should know the regional quadrant. so you should know what to expect kind of coming back this second time around. And you'll actually have a little bit longer rest period than you did in the regional quadrant tournaments in these matchups. So it can be a factor. That's why I think the deeper teams like East, Thunder Basin, and Natrona do have the advantage over some of these other teams that are just not as deep.
Go ahead and switching gears to the boys bracket. What's the headline there? What's the big story there?
I think is since Cheyenne Central complete their revenge tour. They missed state last year. Now, obviously, nobody played at state, but they didn't even make it out of the regional, and everybody thought they were the best team in 4A basketball last year, including myself on the boys' side. So I think they're on a bit of a mission. You've got great size and great athleticism and great skill throughout that lineup. And I think this team might be a little better than last year's team, honestly. I think they've created a little more depth by playing some different guys. And it's going to be a matter of can anybody match them and slow them down.
The last matchup we'll talk to you about is I had to do a double take a little bit because we talked about it on the girls' side. Star Valley versus East. They're going to play on the boys' side as well. However, this one a little bit more intriguing to me because my big question, what's the health of Graydon Buell?
And nobody knows that for sure right now, Elan. That's a great question because he got banged up a little bit in the Shine East win over Laramie in their first game at the regional quadrant last Thursday. He got banged up even more so in the second game against Central and then did not play in Saturday's third-place game. And so they come in as the 4 seed. It was more for precautionary reasons than anything else. I think he's going to be ready to go and full throttle. That creates a nightmare for Star Valley. Now, granted, I have not seen the Braves at all this year. I've seen them a couple times watching them online, but I have not seen them in person, and I like to see teams in person. But they've got a lot of momentum and confidence going with their win streak. It seems like they're playing well together. They could give East some fits, but I tell you what, if Graydon Buell's knocking down a shot, be careful because all of a sudden you start turning your attention to Graydon Buell and other guys can step up and hurt you. Particularly Jake Rail is a nice compliment. He can knock down the 3 ball at a high rate. And they got a couple other guys that kind of will pick their spots and score a little bit. And then they've got a freshman, Drew Jackson, that I think a lot of teams will probably overlook, that he came in the regional quadrant semifinal and scored 13 off the bench. Actually, no, I take that back. He had 17 off the bench and just played an unbelievable game and kind of was the compliment to Graydon Buell, who got his average of 25 in that win over Laramie. So it's one of those where if Star Valley starts paying too much attention to Graydon Buell, he can hurt you as a distributor. Remember, he is a quarterback. And as the 2-time 4A Offensive Player of the Year in football, this guy knows how to distribute the rock on the basketball court as well.
David, thank you so much. That's David Settle of Wyo Preps. He's also the voice of the Laramie Plainsmen. David, it's going to be a great week over in Casper. I'll tell you that right now.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it, guys. I'm looking forward to seeing how 3A plays out, boys and girls, because I want to see if anybody can challenge Douglas. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how 4A plays out and if some of the teams that have been at the top can finish it off this year.
Man, I have a hard time remembering just basic things like, hey, did I upload this interview or did I do this? Or he's just a wealth of knowledge, and we are so lucky that he was able to come onto the show.
Absolutely, and he's the wizard of Wyoming sports, high school sports, and it's always good to chat with him.
Well, that is going to do it for our preview show, our broadcast. A big thank you to Chris Brentle, David Settle, Duke Dance, as well as Erick Pauley. Big thank you to my co-host, Cullen Holt. It's here, ladies and gentlemen. After a year of waiting, the 4A tournament is here. Enjoy the games. We'll see you next time.